Not all serial killers hide in the dark. In the glitz and glamour of the Gold Coast, Eddie is overworked, heartbroken, and about to take the trip of a lifetime with two of his best friends. They've got an old bus, a sense of adventure, and want him to jump on board for a journey down the East Coast and into the barren deserts of the outback. What he doesn't know is that he will be drawn into a world of violence, murder and mayhem, and become witness to possibly the darkest day in Australia's criminal history. Somewhere within the sun-drenched chaos, he may even rediscover love. Dust and Devils, a journey into the dark heart of Australia, where survival means bending the rules of friendship and where the line between good and evil is blown away with a stinging blood-soaked dust. Broken hearts, rebel bikers, open roads and serial killers. Strap yourself in and come for the ride with those who dance with the Dust and Devils. Dust and Devils, a novel by author Darren Kazenko. Learn more at australianbooklovers.com.
Once upon a time. Welcome to Australian Book Lovers, your destination for imagination.
Hello and welcome to everybody. A huge thank you for joining us for the Australian Book Lovers podcast, episode 9. Our mission is to bring fabulous Australian and Indigenous literature that spans a whole range of genres to book lovers around the globe, as well as fantastic resources and information for passionate authors looking to write their next bestseller. I'm Veronica Strachan, and I'm a fantasy and picture book writer, reader, and your co-founder and host for today. And I'm coming to you from Wurundjeri Woiwurrung country.
And I am Darren Kazenko, science fiction and horror author, reader, and of course, one of your other hosts and co-founder of the Australian Book Lovers for this episode 9 of the ABL podcast. And what an exciting episode we've got ahead today, Veronica. This is going to be a super jam-packed one.
It is absolutely jam-packed, and we have to be careful that we don't spend, too many hours here because we've got so many things to say and we've found out so many interesting bits and pieces. News, reviews, and a fabulous interview that I'm really looking forward to. So why don't we start with a little of the, let's go website news. What have you got for us, Darren?
Let's go to news in general. Yeah.
Yep.
Yes, so with regards to website news, we've got some, so as always, we've got a few little things happening behind the scenes in relation to, looking forward to bringing some wonderful tools to authors out there to assist them in marketing and, giving their book the best possible chance it can to get in the hands of eager readers. You may have noticed a special little different introduction to the website when you hit play this time, and that may be a little bit of a hint of one thing that we're looking to bring as an option for eager writers out there looking to expand their marketing toolkit. So very excited about that. A little bit of investment behind the scenes on some equipment and a little bit of a brain strain, just working a few things out, but it's definitely something that's going to be coming forward. Not only that, we're very excited to be soon introducing a couple more logos for our genres. We are currently talking once again with a fantastic artist by the name of Steve Lehman, who has worked with us from the very beginning, and he's going to come up with some amazing animals for us to continue the great tradition of the Australian genre logo artwork. And not only that, but Steve is so graciously accepted an invitation to be a part of a podcast interview very soon. So really looking forward to that. It's going to be a great insight into somebody who works, on the other side of the writing, which is creating the visual aspects to a lot of mediums. He's done a lot of album and record covers, CD covers. He's done work for government advertisement, all sorts, and of course, including book covers. And now he's obviously, I've worked with him for all of my book book covers. But just prior to hitting record, Veronica and I were having a look through some of his work, which is absolutely astounding. And I'm going to keep it under wraps until we have him on the podcast, because once you jump to the link, you're going to all be blown away. And I have no doubt. But and then there is another author that we discovered that is listed their book on Australian Book Lovers website, who has used Steve as well. So I'm looking forward to chatting to Steve to find out about how that went down. But yes, very exciting. So we've got the logos on the way, which we hope to have in the next week or two. So that's going to be really good. And of course, that's not the end of the logos either, because there's many more genres to come. So please do keep those books coming in, and definitely looking forward to rolling out that special new little feature for writers looking to invest and also improve their marketing toolkit. So very exciting stuff, with plenty more behind the scenes, but it is something that is going to be very much like a tightly wound spring. It's being wound back at the moment, and sometime in the near future, or very near future, that spring's going to pop, and it's going to be a whole lot of magic. It's going to erupt on the website, and it's going to make sure that every visit will be full of fun, entertainment, as well as give you so many tools for moving forward as writers. But what about yourself, Veronica? What news do you have for us this episode, number 9?
Well, so many things that I could be sharing, but one of the things I thought would be interesting to say is that the Australian Society of Authors, who we'll be chatting to very soon, have released their FAQs, and they are now publicly available on their website. It's questions about the publishing industry, questions about copyright, questions about publishing contracts, manuscripts, questions about earning a living, very important, and rates of pay. And when I just was having a quick squeeze through, I thought it was a good reminder. I was talking to an author the other day, and they were a reasonably new author, and they were someone who was going into schools and doing workshops. They had written a middle grade fiction, a series. And I said, so you would have your PLR and your ELR sorted? And she kind of looked at me, and I thought, right, very important. So public lending right, PLR, and educational lending right, ELR, are part of a government-run scheme that compensates Australian creators and publishers for the loss of income through the free multiple use of their print work in Australian public and educational lending libraries. So you have to submit your title claims in 5 years of the date of publication, and there's more information on the ASA's website. There's information on the australianarts.gov.au/funding and support/lending rights. And basically what it means is if your book is in a library and somebody borrows it, then there is funding available for you. So it's kind of like a royalty. And over, for your information, over 17,200 individual lending rights payments totaling 22.048 million were paid in 2019-20. So if your book is not already on the register, please get yourself sorted. So for next year, the register is closed. It closes at the end of March. So we probably should have done this a month ago. However, this is a really important piece of information and resource for Australian authors. So
absolutely.
There's some news.
Yes. And look, as you said, we're very excited to be talking to the organisation very soon. But the website, looking through the FAQ, is so much, I mean, essentially, if I had to summarise it in one word, it would be practical. And that is just the practical elements of that I need to educate myself on as well. As far as if you really want to, take the writing seriously, then there are those practical, and I guess you could also say business elements that you can familiarise yourself with. And the FAQs is a great place to start.
It is.
So many interesting tidbits of information that I didn't think to think of.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
We don't know what we don't know. So
no.
Just like as you said with the was it the EPL
and the ELR and PLR?
PLR. Sorry, now I've got a little river band in my head. Now I'm just curious because that's a massive amount of money, and I'm assuming that's Australia based only.
Yes.
Yeah. And is that for just lending in with regards to education? Is that only libraries in schools or educational facilities, or is that
public and educational lending library? So that's your local council library as well.
Wow. Okay. So I guess that just highlights and solidifies, or I should say fortifies, the importance of looking into how you can get your books in the library and why you
Yeah.
should. And that's definitely something I'd like to talk with. What was the lady's name that we're just going to be so kind to join us?
From the ASA?
Yes.
Oh, Olivia Lanchester, the
Olivia. So
CEO we're going to be chatting with. Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah. So definitely one of the questions I will be asking Olivia with regards to the library stuff. And but yeah, that's going to be fantastic. But not to mention, prior to that, you've actually gone to the trouble of organising a fantastic couple of guests for basically what is going to be our very first industry podcast.
Yes. And look, I can't help it. I am addicted to learning, and I want to know everything. Curiosity is one of my strengths, but also one of the dangerous things that sometimes people can feel a little bit interrogated. However, what it does is then I think, oh, who will I find that about? And people want to tell you about the things that they do. And the two women that we have on the podcast, so Ariane James, who's the program coordinator, and CJ Vunch, who's the director of Tas Riders, were just such brilliant examples of people who are passionate about what they do. And I just was in awe of all that they're doing down there for Tasmanian Riders. So really looking forward to that next week.
Yes, definitely.
That's not who we've got on the podcast.
No,
this week.
Today.
Who have we got, Darren?
Well, speaking of energy, enthusiasm, and the kind of character that's going to jump out of the speakers or headphones and completely put a smile on your face and make you want to hit that keyboard at 1,000 miles an hour with coffee slurping and getting thrown over your shoulder, is none other than author Laurie Bell. So, who has got a number of titles on the website. So we've got Whitefire, a Tony Dell adventure. We have The Butterfly Stone. We have The Tiger's Eye. And we have The Good, the Bad, and the Undecided. And chatting with Laurie was just a fantastic experience. As you hear, she really is very, very unique in her energy and her passion. But the conversation we had stretched across a whole range of themes and elements regarding writing and culture and pop culture, etc. And I think that triggered what we thought Veronica, you and I thought we might have a quick chat about today before we go to Laurie's interview, and that is Pulp Fiction. Pop
I guess that's part of it.
Yeah, pop culture pop culture and its influence on literature, and literature's influence on pop culture.
Yeah. So hit me with your first thoughts, Darren.
Well, so to clarify, because I got myself tongue twisted there. So I've got the Little River Band in my head now. I've got Pulp Fiction. I've got a suitcase with mysterious gold light coming out of it. No. So pop culture fiction is usually defined as a genre of fiction where stories are written intentionally to be filled with references from other works and media. So stories in this genre focus solely on using popular cultural references. So that's one particular, I guess, example or definition of pop culture. Culture itself influences literature through religious ideas, moral values, language, gender norms, just to name a few. And when it comes to influencing pop culture, so what is pop culture influenced by? One of the definitions or descriptions I found is pop culture is influenced by films, broadcast radio, literature, television, and, as well as today, I guess, is internet. So urbanization, industrialization, the mass media, and the continuous growth in technology since the late 1700s have all been significant factors in the formation of popular culture. And these elements, including new elements that we're yet to discover, continue to be factors in shaping pop culture today. Now, what I found delving into it, I found, quite interesting thought sort of experiment and thought roller coaster ride is, and of course, once again, inspired by the conversation we had with Laurie, is, for example, when it comes to today, we could use zombies as an example of. So, for example, a whole range of literature today has been influenced by the concept of zombies. But from this, there's been so many different interpretations using the zombie about what the rise of the undead means to our society, and also perhaps the failures of the human race in general that might be reflected in, I guess you could say, the symbolic nature of zombies. But zombies have also influenced literature and media, while in turn literature and media continues to influence new writers and artists that then bring fresh new visions to the playing field of, for example, zombies. So at first I thought, using zombies as a metaphor for pop culture or elements of pop culture, but I thought, it's kind of like a snake chasing its own tail. But I don't think in my head it didn't seem as eloquent as a description as it could be. So I started to think, no, it's more like, this relationship between pop culture influencing literature and literature influencing pop culture. It feels to me that it's more like a closed system of imagination and primal archetypes and symbols that continue to motivate us to question the world around us and how we fit into it individually and as a species. So, there's certain symbols that keep rising, and, every time we add to the art world, so to speak, that art world turns around and inspires the way we interpret art, and then therefore also influence art that influences the creation of art and so forth in this closed ecosystem. That's the way I kind of read it, and I like that idea. I might be totally wrong, but I like it. What about your thoughts, Veronica?
Well, you've given me so much to think about there. I'm just sitting here in awe and thinking, heavens, what do I think about that? That's taken me in a completely different direction. So, because the zombies threw me off, of course, first of all.
Wow, they're so popular today. And I guess if you ask me, because my head's pretty much buried in other things most times, obviously working and writing and just like yourself. But, I know, for example, pop culture, the first thing that pops in my mind is zombies, because it's swept through so much media from the novels and through to television, through to movies. And it continues. It's just such a pop icon now.
I'm not entirely sure that I've absorbed everything that you say, so I'm going to have to listen and have another read or do a little bit more research. So when I think of pop culture, the first thing I think of is the little pop dolls in boxes that my kids love, and they all want some for Christmas, and they've got walls of them and that kind of thing. So it almost seems to me as though in my mind it's associated with the merchandise that kind of goes along. And I did some thinking about how literature then affects culture, which books are incredibly influential. And it's, that same quote that I keep bringing back, which is, if you use the right words in the right place, you can nudge the world a little. And I think that if we go to early pop culture and think that, illustrated books and messages and things that were written, of course, influence culture all the way through, and that is popular culture, according to the definition. It's the things that we talk about. Books don't always seem to get into art, though. Sometimes it feels like they kind of slide around the edges. One of the things, though, that I wanted to look at it in terms of a personal influence was that then I got sucked into a rabbit hole about the benefits of reading to the individual, how they influence the individual. So there was, we could do lots of information about that, but it's, it's something like, as soon as you've read about 6 minutes, well, you've reduced your stress by, 50% or something like that.
Really?
So
wow.
There's some amazing stuff that I won't get into, because then I'll go down a different rabbit hole. But in terms of books being popular culture, I think we can also look at some of the other things that came up in Laurie's interview around fan fiction. So not only are zombies now everywhere, but people are taking the things that they love, be they TV shows or books or whatever, and writing their own interpretation. So we think about how that influences the individual, and then the group gets together, and before you know it, you've got fan fiction websites, you've got people writing episodes for shows that didn't necessarily happen. They're performing shows, or they're getting people to read them. And fan art, is that fan fiction art? Fan art, I'm not quite sure. Fan art, I guess.
I'm not too sure either.
Yeah, and sort of Instagram and those kind of picture websites are again full of groups who are, and this is amazing, drawing the characters from books based on what they've interpreted. So, if you think about the influence of that culture on the person, and then I'm just amazed at some of the books. I'm thinking in particular, one that comes up is the Evernight series by Jay Kristoff. And I know that there's huge fan fiction around the main protagonist, Mia Corvia, who's in there, and there's just some brilliant stuff. And there was also a young woman who was doing some fan fiction who then got some funding to do some short films, and she did like 3 episodes, and it was like, oh, this is so fantastic, because and liaised with the author and, made sure that was all right, and everything else just was brilliant. So I'll have to have a look and see who that person is while we're having a listen to the interview, and I'll come back to you with that person's name. So they can become the influence that can become deeply ingrained in that person's life, or it can be just that there's, words or a sentence or a particular book or a way somebody expresses themselves that changes the way you want to live. And I think rather than pop culture, which I feel perhaps a little bit divorced from, I think books that have changed the way that I live my life, I can definitely see the influence there.
Yeah, that's interesting you say you feel a little bit divorced from, because, and I think that's I think that may come from everybody's personal interpretation of the word pop, or
yes,
because it, for example, if we're talking music, pop has a very definitive meaning to myself.
Yeah.
But when it comes to, for example, art or literature, it means I interpret it as something completely different, and vice versa. Other people in their fields will interpret it as different. But to be moved by a piece of literature to the point where it affects you affects the way you move forward in life. Yeah. I would say, well, yeah, it's a tricky one, isn't it? It doesn't necessarily mean you've read something that's popular culture, but you are adding to culture by making that change in the way you live your life. Yeah. And that may resonate. It's again, it's such a deep rabbit hole. Just like you mentioned before with the growing popularity of fan fiction.
Yeah.
Which is just amazing, because if you think about it, there are, so many groups of people out there where a particular story or series or movie or television series, whatever it might be in the art realm, particular story and characters have resonated to such a degree that they've chosen to keep those characters and that story arc alive.
Yeah.
And give it a whole, a limitless, palette to sort of travel upon. And that is just fantastic. We always talk about the cliche of when you're writing and the characters come to life. There's, on a society level, that can be the case too, because these characters come to life, and it's almost as if the writers out there, the fans, feel obligated to maintain those lives of the character. It's not like those characters, let's call a character Johnny, for example. It's not like someone's going to write Johnny in a completely different manner, because it wouldn't be Johnny anymore. So Johnny, is written by maybe a whole, team of different writers across the globe, maybe as part of fan fiction, but the character in essence remains the same. Obviously there's going to be art stuff, which I find really interesting. Same with science fiction. I think science fiction, as far back as we can think that it began in literature, it's always been a hybrid of what we understand today and the possibilities of tomorrow. And then those
what ifs.
Those what ifs in turn have given us the confidence, we're made of scientists and engineers. They've given, and electricians, I guess, to a certain degree, or anybody really, I suppose. I take all that back. But the what ifs of science fiction have also fed back in a feedback loop that comes back and inspires and motivates people to try and build for the future. And then as that technology grows, then that in turn inspires the new waves of science fiction based on our new understandings of technology today, so that the what ifs become a whole new realm. And from those whole new what if realms, that feeds back and then inspires, motivates, and educates us to think outside the square or reach for those new horizons as far as technical. So it really does feel to me, and maybe it's not just pop culture, but I think of it as pop culture because it's themes that are with us today. But it's just such a feedback loop, and I guess at first, the idea of pop culture does seem to suggest something light and maybe purely entertainment based. For example, the little figurines, of which I was given one, which happens to be Jack from The Shining, and he includes his axe in his hand and his little typewriter with the same words on the page. Yes, of course. He sits right next to me there. So we, for a lot of us, I guess, or at least for me, it does seem that pop culture seems to suggest something light, maybe purely entertainment based.
Mm.
But in reality, I don't know, it feels more like evidence that as writers, and I'm talking from the literature side of things, that we are a part of something so much bigger, like something so, I guess, mysterious and magical, that, and within this strange closed ecosystem of imagination, we've got the chance to explore our own individual relationship with the universe, but we've also got the opportunity to contribute to an organic system of literature that basically began with cave paintings, didn't it? And will continue wherever we go. So it's a cool feedback. Luke.
Sorry.
Yeah, go.
It's interesting to think then about what goes through the writer's minds. And in some ways, this is a little different between fiction and non-fiction for me, for example, and this is, not generalizing, but I feel like in fiction that I'm just writing exactly for myself, and should the character become as popular as whatever and people start to follow her or want to be a dragon or whatever that might be, it's almost a miracle, as sometimes things just take off and you have a certain reader and before you know it, it's becoming something famous and there is a degree of celebrity in pop culture. And then with nonfiction, with my memoir perhaps, and the workbook and journal, and I know from other nonfiction books that I read, it almost feels like the intent is more deliberate to change the way to educate. And yet, maybe I'm changing my mind now, because in fiction, there is almost the conscious need to entertain and to escape. So I don't know, maybe that doesn't feel, but I think in a writer's mind, when they sit down to write those words, these broad influences are probably not necessarily uppermost for most people.
Yeah, well, I mean, you mentioned nonfiction, and I think nonfiction could be, I would say nonfiction, as a general rule, I'm thinking it could probably fall into pop culture, depending on what it is. Hardcore physics books may not, but nonfiction, I think, can be very much time-stamped. It's a reflection of a very particular time, a lot of the time. So, for example, if it's a nonfiction biography or or a non-fiction interpretation or observation on something, whether it be a journalistic piece or a political piece, but it's a very specific time established.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, when pop culture fiction, it can have just as much heavy themes, but it's usually in the realm of stories, which by their nature can be a little bit timeless and enjoyed wherever. I don't know, that's just us,
Maybe we need to get someone in to have a chat to us about storytelling. I know a few people, it might be good. So now Definitely. I've also remembered the woman who did those YouTube shows about Nevernight, and it is Piera Ford with an E on the end. So have a look at those. And so they again kind of morphed out of the love for the books, and the vivid descriptions made it kind of easy to do. But pop culture. There you go.
There you
All
go.
Right.
Like lots of glitter and colours and diving through rabbit holes through the universe. But no, definitely a fun topic to have a think about. So, and again, it'd be really interesting to hear from any of our listeners out there. What are your thoughts on the influence of pop culture on literature? Do you think it's a enclosed system? Do you think we have an important part to play as writers? Please do, we'd love to hear your thoughts, anything at all, your feedback. So, and of course you can write to us at australianbooklovers@gmail.com, and we would love to hear from you. But,
so is this kind of the perfect time for me to share my first quote?
Ooh, should we do the quotes now or after the interview, do you think? How about we do one now?
One now, one after.
Okay, done deal. Excellent.
So this one...
Excellent plan.
Excellent plan. All right. So this is a quote by Maria Popova, and if anybody follows the Brain Pickings website and newsletter, you will know Maria Popova. But her quote is, "When people try to tell you who you are, don't believe them. You are the only custodian of your own integrity, and the assumptions made by those that misunderstand who you are and what you stand for reveal a great deal about them and absolutely nothing about you." So I thought that kind of fitted in with the whole pop culture and influence and those kind of things. So
interesting, yeah. And of course, because someone's interpretation or impression of another person, it's only ever one brief moment in time. And, so I'd hate for somebody to make a judgment on me based on my attitude behind the steering wheel and peak out traffic, which I definitely try and avoid at all times now.
Or even, to make first impressions. And, we could talk about those things that fit into the brain. If they're thinking about my footwear now, which is currently some pale blue fluffy slippers, so you thought I was an intellectual. Shit.
No. First impressions, look, like you said, I think they definitely, they do play a part, but I think that quote pretty accurate in the sense of it says more about the observer than the observed at that point. It's because a true observation comes with time and the sharing and stuff. So awesome quote.
And I like the fact that you are the only custodian of your own integrity. So people can tell you how they think you should feel or how you should feel, but it is just in your hands. You are the custodian of your own integrity. I really like that bit.
Yeah, that's right. And I guess it's one of those beautiful art forms and skills to learn in life, which I have far from mastered or learned. But to be able to, learn to know which emotions are beyond your control and which ones are, and then knowing that you have the right to feel, do you know what I mean? Like your state of being, your state of mind, is like you said, you're the custodian of that. But of course, that comes with caveats, because there's certain things that are going to be unavoidable when it comes to, sensations and the effects on your state of mind. But as a general rule, when you wake up, that state of mind begins with you, nobody else. And anything that rolls on from there is going to be directly affected by that. So yes, you're definitely in your own custody. I'm in my own custody, yes. And there's no escaping that. So no. I don't think so anyway. But now, my quote is a little bit based on science fiction, because we're talking about science fiction and pop culture.
Yep.
And this one is by Ray Bradbury. And so Ray said that science fiction is any idea that occurs in the head and doesn't exist yet, but soon will, and will change everything for everybody, and nothing will ever be the same again. As soon as you have an idea that changes some small part of the world, you are writing science fiction. It is always the art of the possible, never the impossible. Yes, I like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Always the art of the possible, never the impossible.
Yeah.
So dream big, people.
Yeah. Yeah. If you can imagine it, you can make it happen. That's kind of the thing, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, it's definitely worth trying to make it happen. That's for sure, if you can imagine it.
And he was a great writer. I really liked a lot of his work. Really good. I remember being incredibly influenced by reading Fahrenheit 451, where they, that was the temperature at which paper burnt, and the particular dystopian world that he had. They were burning books, but people took one book, the rebels took one book and read it cover to cover and learnt it, and then it didn't matter that the paper was destroyed, but it was there. So
yeah, so you could say it was in the imagination ecosystem.
Exactly right. So that's spot on. Nice segue.
Well, without further ado, I think it's time for the headphones to catch fire from all that energy at the 451 Fahrenheit temperature. And let's introduce Laurie Bell and have an insight into her wonderful literary world.
Excellent.
Okay, without further ado, here is Laurie. Fantasy and science fiction writer Laurie Bell, thank you so much for joining us on the Australian Book Lovers podcast. How are you?
I'm very good. Thank you so much for having me.
It is an absolute pleasure. Obviously, we've just been having a little bit of a chat beforehand, but really looking forward to delving into all the little motivations you might have for your works and hearing about the inspirations for your books, and obviously want to talk to you about what you've got planned for the big year ahead, 2021.
Oh, hopefully it's better than last year.
Well, it can't get much worse, but then I'm also quietly knocking on wood while I say that.
Absolutely.
We literally have to take every day as it comes at the moment.
So true.
Yeah, but more time to write, depending on your position. So, but first of all, thank you so much for all your submissions. You're one of the first wave of authors to trust us with listing your book titles. And you've actually submitted 4 titles to the Australian Book Publishers Library. And they include The Butterfly Stone, as well as the sequel to The Butterfly Stone called The Tiger's Eye. You've also included a novel called White Fire, as well as a book called The Good, the Bad, and the Undecided.
Absolutely.
So I thought jump straight down to the Laurie Bell rabbit hole, I wanted to start with, I guess, what I assume is the first point of call, which is White Fire. Oh, sorry. Yes, White Fire, I do believe. Did you write that at the age of 17?
I did. Yes. I wrote that while I was at school. I had a very close-knit group of friends, and the poor things had to put up with me talking all sorts of things, sci-fi and Star Trek and
all the good stuff.
All the good stuff, absolutely. And a mate of mine, Anthony, we would sit there talking sci-fi and what ifs. What if this happened on this world, and what if this world was made of what? And yeah, it was just something that we both really enjoyed, and that's what really launched me into writing White Fire.
Fantastic. Well, it would have been fertile ground for the imagination back then, especially being in a position to have good friends to chat. I'm just wondering, back then, can you remember when you were looking to the future and discussing science fiction and science factors, as far as what the future might look like, did you predict anything that would come true? Did you predict a lot of the stuff we had today?
It's funny. I used to watch Doctor Who a lot as a kid, and
scary too.
Oh, I know. I loved it. But of course, my doctor at the time was the Fourth Doctor, and he had this lovely robot called K9 who followed him around everywhere and tended to be the one to save the day in the episodes that he was in.
We're talking, sorry, Laurie, we're talking Tom Baker, aren't we, with the jelly
Yes,
baker?
we are, absolutely.
My favourite as well.
Fourth Doctor.
Snap.
He has been usurped now by David Tennant, I will admit. However, the Fourth Doctor was definitely my original Doctor.
A fine choice.
Absolutely. And so K9 was the robot dogs that went everywhere with them. Unfortunately, in those shows, he was unable to get upstairs.
No.
So when I was writing White Fire, I also have a robot dog.
Yes, I understand. White Fire is essentially about an agent with a robot dog, and you've described it as Guardians of the Galaxy meets Star Wars, a novel full of action and adventure. Now that's a huge, excellent description. But it was the Doctor Who K9. Was that an inspiration or just
very much? And I think in a way the Doctor was too. I think Tony running around with Mate, her dog, which is probably the most Australianism out of my science fiction series. Her and Mate, Tony and Mate. They were together. They're my sort of female James Bond of the space agency, and I think K9 was probably the inspiration for Mate. In fact, I think at one point I did have Mate shooting lasers, and I still do. So there is definitely a bit of K9 in there.
Oh, that is fantastic. And I've got a soft spot already for the story because with the Hallucinogen Project and the book, book 2 coming out, Godless, I've got a cat who starts off as a normal cat, but there will be a transition. But I mean, I've read that you basically you penned that first story, as we said, at 17, and mostly handwritten on the train.
Yes.
And I have to ask, what does it feel like? I mean, I don't know if I've come across any scribblings from back when I was writing, back in the early teenage years, but it must be so self-fulfilling and proud to have, that story in print now. And I mean, obviously it's gone through changes. It's probably gone through a lot of editing and a lot of twists and turns, but to have that story that you came up with at that age, and now it's like a part of your library, as a part of your writing career. That must feel fantastic.
I have my name on it, and it's in print. Absolutely. It's one of those dreams that I had when I was much younger, not thinking that anything would ever come of it. And it was primarily written for this small group of friends, I wanted to force feed them to read it. And I'm sure they ended up with many, many copies and read many different versions. So I probably should apologise retroactively for that.
To be honest, Laurie, in my head just then, I just imagine you sitting there on the lawn at lunchtime and reading and them all curled around your feet.
We were actually in a classroom. We had an empty classroom that I don't know how we were allowed to go in there, but the four of us would go in there and I don't know, we'd get on these massive rants and talk about all sorts of things. So yes, I was very much wanting instant feedback back there. Actually, that hasn't changed.
And those dear friends, so they each have a copy of the book now? They
do. They have a personalised copy, and I'm still in touch with all of them. And
that's great.
Except, and he'll hate me for pointing these out, but Anthony, read it, please.
You have now received the command, Anthony.
You've been outed.
The question will come up within the next 2 weeks, so please be prepared, Anthony.
That's right.
Page 27, how does it begin?
Oh, dear. Although he probably remembers.
No, but that is fantastic. And as a story, was it something you've been tinkering with all that time, or was it something that you worked with it and then put away for a few years and revisited it?
Very much so. I wrote it way back when and put together a copy that I printed for myself in little ring binding. And it's
beautiful.
Actually sitting on the bottom of a cupboard. No, my bookshelf in the lounge room, actually. I'll tell a lie. So I still have that. I have that original version. But then, real life got in the way and work took priority. So it was put away. I didn't even think about it for quite a long time until I started writing a book it's a work in progress called Blood Fever, which was written 10 years ago. So that's probably when I got back into really that drive for writing and chatting with a few friends online and a good friend in Sydney. And I guess the bug hit me again and I needed to actually go forth and do something with my words.
Well, it's such a beautiful tale of how your writing began. You know, it's so often it's someone who loves reading or love writing, and it's not, I wouldn't say it's an isolated event, but it can be. It's a solo. You sit down by yourself and you write. Whereas it sounds like you're very animated and discuss the ideas with your friends and came up with those ideas. That's a beautiful start to a writing career.
Yeah, it's probably why I enjoy it so much. It started in so much fun.
And I'm hoping it still is fun.
Well, certainly it can have its moments when you're stuck in the middle of an editing.
I call them adult moments. We don't need them all the time, but we have to pretend to be an adult at some point as writers.
True.
That's when
devastating.
Yeah, hit the keyboard, swear a little bit, say something political, and then get back to being.
Off we go again. Yeah.
Yep. Now, so Wi-Fi, essentially an agent with a robot dog. You've already won me over.
Excellent.
Now, the good, the bad, and the undecided. I understand it's not quite book 2, but essentially is an anthology with a number of tales and characters woven from the Whitefire story.
Absolutely. Well, when I was writing Whitefire, the very original story that I wrote when I was 17 was multi-point of view.
Oh, okay.
And so I had various different characters throughout the story who got their own backstory. They had their own drivers. There was all sorts of motivations as to why they were doing what they were doing. And through its many, 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 many versions of Whitefire that went through, those stories were put away. I've learned and been told by many in the writing world as well, never delete anything. Always cut it. Yeah, always cut it and keep it in a special file, because one day that information will be invaluable. And
that's a really good tip, actually. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And sitting with one of my lovely editors, I adore my editors. They make me sound so good. My lovely editor, Libby, who suggested that I could put that sort of material into a anthology of short stories. So that launched that idea and off I went with it. So it's definitely not a book 2. It is a collection of short stories about what is happening to other people during the events of Whitefire.
Yeah, that's fantastic, and it's quite a unique approach. And when I think about it and consider what you've done, it's almost as if, it just gives the reader a really powerful insight into how imaginative and rich the landscape was for Whitefire, in the sense that you had, each character had their backstory, had their future events, their past events, their character arcs, and I can only assume that in the process of all those edits and all those different versions of Whitefire, that all those bylines and different plot lines and different journeys for characters, they existed just as real as the main one, which tells me Whitefire will have to be spectacular if it was done with that much vividness. I think that's great.
You. Oh, thank you. I'll take that. Absolutely. I'll pop that up on the cover.
But I do wonder, was any of the Good, Bad and the Undecided, any of the short stories penned or at least sketched out during rewrites or versions of Whitefire, or was it definitely something you did? It was that?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, I even have a young adult or middle grade, I guess you could say middle grade, introduction to Tony as a main character, with some things that were happening to her quite young, that she was up to all sorts of shenanigans, which naturally would fall out from the rest of Whitefire, which I must have a look at that at some point, because that would actually make a fun novella.
Oh, there we go.
It just keeps going on, Whitefire.
And so the branches continue, yes.
That's right.
That's because it definitely sounds like the story is well and truly alive.
Yes.
And has a permanent place in your imagination.
Absolutely. It is. I hesitate to say that it's my favourite. I love all of my books, but it's certainly, being the first is memorable. And
it can never be number two.
That's right, exactly. It'll hold a special place in my heart.
Well, I mean, considering that you did just go back to the fact that you wrote it by pen on the train, it's something I've always wondered, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. As in, when it comes to writing and our rhythm and pacing and just the length of sentence and how we use those different lengths, etc. Do you think that writing with a pen, I mean, obviously there's a difference between writing with a pen and on a keyboard, but do you think there's a vast difference in the writing style? So do you think we, as writers, we have two styles within us, and one is with the pen and one is with the keyboard?
I definitely think so. And certainly from my personal experience, and obviously that's the only way I could take the suggestion, because I don't know how anyone else
that's right
does this, but certainly from my point of view, when I write on the page to when I type directly into a computer, it comes out very, very different. Mind you, I have the worst handwriting known to man, so it helps to then use my draft 2 as this is me typing my story back into the computer, because I need to figure out what on earth I was talking about in the first draft.
So if it was good, you'll remember, and if not, it's squiggles that will go.
It's amazing that I will actually put in a line that within 2 or 3 lines that I've written comes in, and it's the same line. So I've done it so many times now, it can't be accidental.
I am so glad you said that. And I can't believe you just said that, because you're absolutely right. I do scribble sometimes down notes and ideas, and as can happen on pieces of paper that in theory are tucked into that special notebook, and then of course who knows where they go, and then a couple of days later I'll be, what was that great opening sentence I wanted to use, and I'll have to start again, and I'll write it, and then I'll find the piece of paper and go, that was
same line.
Yeah, incredible.
It is amazing how it happens. And I do find that for me, I have an hour on the train, and I still handwrite
today.
Still today, I have an hour trip into the city for my real life day job, and I still write my first draft into a hardcover notebook.
Wow.
On the train. So I've found that for me, that's my process. That works the best for the way my brain works, whether it's my brain's running 100 miles a minute, so therefore so is my pen, and I'm not really thinking about what specifically I'm writing. It just kind of happens, but it cuts me off without preparing to. Do you know what I mean? My station will come up. I'll be right in the middle of a sentence. Yes. And it'll cut me off. And because of that sharp break, I seem to be able to come back into the next part a lot easier than if I wrap myself up beautifully, like in a chapter. If you wrap it up beautifully at the end of a chapter, it's harder to pick it up to start the next chapter because it's...
You're focused on a future point, and then you arrive at that future point, and it hasn't had that groundwork.
That's exactly right.
That mental building.
So I find I do that quite well. It helps that I don't have a few friends of mine get a bit sick on trains and travel and cars. So I don't have any of those problems. I am very able to switch off when I'm on the train and just... Right.
The train is a godsend, and I spent probably a year and a half writing and researching, but all my research done on the train. So at that time, I was exactly the same position, about 55 minutes train to the city to work. So you're looking at, give or take 10 hours a week sitting there, and
absolutely,
you can gobble up a lot of books. And of course, as soon as that, I always go to the end station to come to my house, and by the time that train pulls in and I tuck the book away, all that research that I've done on that train trip for that day, it just starts fueling all those ideas. And then so when I get home, it's like, whoa, I've got to get this out. So the train is fantastic, most definitely. And I think that's such a cool way to do it, to handwrite and shape things out. And then, like you said, transfer it onto the keyboard, and then you can expand what you think maybe needs expanding and keep what
exactly.
you think.
And that does work as my second draft as I'm transferring it to the computer.
So cool. And so you're currently working on anything now on the train, just out of curiosity?
I was doing some research this afternoon for book 3 of my Stones of Power series, which is my young adult fantasy series, published by Wayne's Peak Publishing.
Well, that's a fantastic segue. Let's have a chat about we'll start with the Butterfly Stone, which is the book 1.
Yes.
And I understand you've described it as a YA fantasy fiction. Sort of a Scooby-Doo mystery with magic, or Nancy Drew mystery with magic, depending on your generation.
Absolutely.
I have a question. What happens if I watched both? Sorry, should I say I read Nancy Drew at the same time I was watching Scooby-Doo?
Fantastic. I think that just makes this book in particular so much more enjoyable.
Well, who doesn't love Scooby-Doo? And I'm sure most people out there remember Scooby-Doo. Or a Nancy Drew mystery.
I hope so. Yep.
So can you tell me with the Butterfly Stone, and when you say it's a sort of Scooby-Doo, I mean, we were talking before with Doctor Who and the K9, is there any elements that crossed over? Because it's funny, the white fire cover art, which I think is fantastic. It's got some,
absolutely adore it. Yeah,
it's so crisp and clean and to the point, and obviously it draws your eyes to the white outlines. But after reading your description as being a sort of Scooby-Doo mystery, then when I looked at the cover for the white fire, or more to the point, the good, bad, and the undecided, I could sort of see like a Scooby outline of the gang. So I thought, that's funny. But of course, but the Butterfly Stone has beautiful artwork, as does the Tiger's Eye.
It absolutely does.
That glass resin jewelry paperweight art form, I guess you could say. But please do explain how Scooby-Doo mystery.
Well, I'll throw in the covers for those ones are designed by Flirtation Designs. So I believe my publisher gave them a very open view when it came to the cover. So this design really came just from the beauty and the concept, which is just stunning to me.
Okay, and so that design company, they're based in Australia, or because I understand it's a US
that's right. Yes, it's a US publisher. Just a little family-run publishing company who are just wonderful. They've been lovely to me, and I've felt very looked after by them. Lots of things obviously going on in the US at the moment and over the last year, but they've stayed very, very attentive, and I'm so pleased that I've got the series with them. And they have actually, hopefully, they'll pick up book 3 when I send it through to them. And
of course they will.
Beg and plead.
Of course they will. So can you tell us a little bit about the inspiration for the Butterfly Stone?
Oh, this is a great story.
Excellent. I love it.
Oh, this is a great story. About 5-6 years ago, I do a lot of prompt writing on my blog. I have a blog of a lot of flash fiction and short pieces that are written by being prompted. It's a great exercise, I think, at least for me, for my brain, to just jump in and jump out. It's short, sharp, here's a prompt, write something.
I had to look through some of the stuff on your website. It does look super cool. And obviously for everybody listening at the moment, we'll have links to the websites and all the stuff we discussed. So definitely take a visit. And have a look through
jump in and have a
Laurie's
read.
Flash Fiction.
Lots of short pieces. So if you don't have a lot of time, but it's great for reading on the train.
Perfect.
There's my plug. With the prompt pieces, I had one prompt that was a one-line prompt. And it was a really tricky one because the prompt was to pick a book out of your bookshelf, go to a random page, pick a random line, and write something that comes to mind.
Wow, okay.
So the prompt is really open.
Yeah, that's kind of leaving every door open there.
Absolutely. So I wrote a short story, a short piece about a young girl stuck in a cupboard.
So do you remember the basic premise of the sentence that you've discovered when you opened to your random page?
I do, actually. And the short story is still on my blog, which can be found through a bit of hard work. Hang on, let me very quickly see if I can find that. There it is. The line that I picked, which influenced this particular line, is, she wasn't a pessimist, oh no, but more often than not, she ended up in crazy situations just like this one.
Oh, there we go. That leaves a lot of room for
adventure, doesn't it? That's right, absolutely. So that line's obviously been edited now, and that's the final version that it's in. But the original line was very different. But that whole short story is actually chapter 9 of the Butterfly Stone, the start of chapter 9 of the Butterfly Stone. Yeah, so it was about 1,000 words, maybe 800 words, something like that.
So essentially you did a bit of flash fiction that ended up being part of the
I loved it so much. I thought,
not the beginning or the end, but somewhere in the middle.
Exactly. Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
Crazy.
So it sort of developed from there, but I really loved the character and I loved the idea and the magic of being stuck in a closet and having to use your magic to get yourself out. And it took off from there.
Fantastic. And I understand the Butterfly Stone was a winner of the 2020 Reader's Favourite Bronze Award in the YA Fantasy and Urban category.
Yes, that's right. I was stunned by that. That was so exciting to receive that recognition. It's readers, they love what they love. Well, I'm going to go with that.
They love what they love, and they obviously know a good book when they come across one.
Yeah, I was so happy.
And so the Butterfly Stone, when you were working on that particular novel, did you already have in mind that there would be a book 2, or was that something that came towards the end when
it's funny, I always
took its own turn?
Pictured as it's pictured and being pitched as 5 books.
Wow, okay, so you've already got the whole story
very
outlined.
Very lightly.
In pencil.
But I certainly have book 3 written, and I'm editing that at the moment, and I can see very clearly book 4 now. So yes, I do believe that we shall get there.
I've no doubt, considering the amount of books you've already got going. And what about for the listeners out there? What would be a brief description of the Butterfly Stone and the Tiger's Eye? I understand it's centered around Tracy Masters.
Yes, that's right. So Tracy Masters is a 15-year-old who desperately wants to be a detective. Her uncle is a Magekind detective. Tracy is also Magekind. There are 2 types of people in the world of the Stones of Power. There are Magekind and there are Norms. So you have the regular person who does not have magic.
Norm.
Yep, me too. Very much to my disappointment, me too.
Excellent. I'm finally a Norm.
And there are also Magekind. And Tracy is Magekind. So her uncle is a Magekind detective. He takes on Magekind cases, though he's not very good as a detective. So Tracy desperately wants to help him. And someone walks into the door with a case of a missing necklace. And it all goes from there.
You have to love detective stories and unraveling a case or starting a case. And like you said, it all unravels from there.
It does.
That sounds super cool. Yeah, absolutely. And Tracy will obviously be a part of all the books at this stage, without giving too much away, of course.
Yes, Tracy is my main character. So we follow Tracy through her adventures. And she does have a group of fabulous friends, hence a little bit of the Scooby-Doo feel that comes through here. She has a wonderful group of friends that help her along the way. So
Must have been super fun to write.
oh, absolutely. And I have to admit, there's a lot of madcap family things going on in the story as well. Tracy has a very madcap family, and a sister who drives her absolutely balmy.
Oh, there we go. That can't be right. Siblings
Oh,
driving each
can't
other up the
imagine
wall. No, that's amazing stories to know that you've got out there. And what I'd like to have a chat with you a bit more at the moment as well is, with regards to the Butterfly Stone, the Tiger's Eye, and Whitefire, and the Good, Bad, and the Undecided, and future books. Now, you have obviously had quite a large literary journey, starting from writing your original story on pen, and you're now with publishing overseas, a United States-based publishing company. You've dealt with, I've read, from what I've seen, like lots of different editing processes, different people. I understand you found some great editors now that you work with regularly. How has it been as far as your learning curve and that journey to go from writing a story and then traversing those unknowns of, well, how do you get published, and how do I know when the book's ready, and how do I know it needs editing, and those first steps to editing? I mean, is it a process you're comfortable in now and confident, or is it still learning, or is any hints and tricks and tips and warnings and good luck for writers out there that are just beginning that journey or may be on that, deep in that journey? But it's always great to hear from someone else that's been taking that same challenge on.
Well, certainly when I wrote Whitefire at 17, I had no idea how much was involved in putting a book together. I've learnt so much over the past, it's really been 10, 12 years that I've really been pushing the publishing side and telling myself I will finish and I will get these published. And
on a mission.
Oh, well, the first part of, well, yes, on a mission. I think like Tony for a moment. Yes, on a mission, the first step is to complete the darn thing.
Yes. Oh, don't tell me that. That means I'm going to hurry up and get the sequel finished.
Get it written. And that is that's your first stepping stone. But it's only the first stepping stone in a very, very lengthy journey. If you're lucky, like myself, I had quite a few good friends and many good friends in the online world who get people around you that support you, I think is the biggest takeaway with a lot of my writing journey. I have some wonderful writing colleagues that I found online in the writing community, in the #AusWrites group, and there's quite a few actually, the #writing community. And in the early days, I was on a few workshopping and blogs when I was very, very young, message boards and note boards and all sorts of things online. Writing, I was a fan fictioner. I was writing fan fiction when I was very young.
Oh,
excellent. Yes.
Well,
love my fan fiction.
And it must have helped you develop some fantastic skills that are obviously been put to good use.
Absolutely. And the community is mad and wonderful and glorious and so supportive. So I've found that's been really useful just in asking the questions. And don't be afraid to ask the questions. What am I doing now? What do I do now? What's my next step? What's a good idea? Finding editors. I apologize to every editor that I've ever worked with because I have an issue with commas and with the em dash. And I think they will all swear to having late nights removing commas and removing em dashes.
I don't think that's your fault or my fault. I blame the comma entirely.
It is absolutely the comma's fault.
Yes, after chapter 3 or usually around chapter 4, the comma makes no more sense. It looks like an alien little spot on the page, and you go.
I like to say that I am of the William Shatner comma. That is my world. There is a comma after everything.
Yeah.
Well, when I was at school, they taught us, put a comma in when you take a breath.
This is right, yeah. But that's not the case so much at the moment.
No, well, I've had many friends tell me with early versions of things that it reads the way I talk. I
That's not a
think that
bad thing, is
might
it?
be because I speak with a lot of comments.
Well, that's good. It keeps everyone's attention, you see.
Oh, Captain Kirk, I love you.
Yeah.
So,
Well, hey, he did all right.
well, that's very true. So, yes, I am of the Shatner comma ilk. And yes, I apologize to every editor known to man who will come across my work. So certainly getting good people who are good at what they do. And
Yes.
I love my editors because they do what I can't, which is all that grammar and attention to detail and making me sound great. It's not all me, I promise.
It is a collaborative effort many times, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Well, to a certain degree. Obviously,
Yeah.
you bring a completed product that just needs finessing, I guess.
Yep.
Having worked with editors quite a bit now, have you found any like really positive hints, tricks, or approaches to your writing that you've developed or incorporated since working with editors that's working really well for you as far as when you're doing your drafts?
I find with my early drafts, I probably don't give enough detail as to where to really ground a person where they are.
Okay.
I know it in my head. It's there. It's really clear in my head, but it doesn't always come out onto the page. So having my wonderful editors actually say, okay, where are they? What's going on? What are they doing? So that's been really useful to helping me ground my main characters. I love dialogue. It's dialogue heavy. All of my books tend to be quite dialogue heavy. So having those moments to step back and actually say, okay, where are we right now? What are we doing? What are we touching? What are we looking at? That really helps to ground the reader, I think, in the work. So that's a useful tip.
Oh, great. That's fantastic.
And get the book done is the other useful tip.
Yes, 100%.
I've read that many, many times. I've heard it from so many authors, and I completely agree with it.
I guess there is sometimes we put our own pressure on ourselves, and I think, look, I can't, like as we said before, I can't speak for everybody, but some of the pressure to just finish it comes from that feeling that it needs to be perfect the first time.
Yes.
And I know that sometimes I'll sit there on a paragraph and find myself 20, 30 minutes in, not happy with 2 sentences.
What do you mean? It's not perfect first time?
Yes. So I will, and then of course I'll have to slap myself in the head and say, idiot, you could have had a couple of pages done by now, fix it later.
Yes. I think that's why I love the train so much, because I only have that 50-minute, I'll just throw it out onto the page, and it's all dialogue. It's he said, she said, bang, 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 just to get the scene down, and then coming back to it later and actually saying, okay, what's actually happening while all this dialogue is going on? And I know that, I certainly know that none of my work is ever perfect at the first time or the 9th draft or the 23rd draft. I can pick at anything. And even now, if I open up one of my lovely published pieces, I'll find an error and
wow.
I will find something that drives me nuts. But I think you're always learning.
Yes, and look, you're always going to find something that you might want to change, but that's the nature with any art, I think. And
absolutely.
And just like a painting or a song, once the song's recorded or once the painting's done, it is its own entity then.
And I've learned.
And a book is, once it's published or once you've done that, then don't touch it.
Yes, yeah.
Warts and all.
That's right. And I've learned something with each book, and I take that to the next book. And each book I'm finding is getting that smidgen, not necessarily easier, but certainly I feel like I'm getting more of the picture in those first drafts, and I know what to look for because I've been picked up on it many, many times. Please ignore the commas. Yeah, so each time I put something out there, it's that little bit better than maybe it was before, and mind you, Whitefire is still my one true love, and it is perfect.
But no, I think what you say couldn't be truer, and that is, it's the importance of having momentum moving forward, always trying to be, even if it's 1%, a little bit better than before, incorporate the lessons from the past into the future.
Yep,
yeah,
exactly.
And,
so picking up those show don't tell moments, picking up the dialogue I tend to put in some stage direction. I get picked up on this a lot. I come from a theatre background.
I was going to talk to you about that, but I'm curious because you mentioned before that you sometimes outline the basics of your story, especially when you're on train, the dialogue, and which is kind of, at least from my perspective, it's a little bit of a different approach because normally I'll set the scene and determine what the action or whatever it's going to be, and then the conversation or the dialogue will be based around what is happening on that scene. But that's kind of the other way. But then you just talked about stage direction. So can you tell me a little bit more about what you believe stage direction is when it comes to writing?
Oh, absolutely. Well, I do come from a theatre background. I've volunteered at my local theatre company, Lilydale Athenaeum Theatre Company, a shout out, for the last 10, 12, no, even longer. Gosh, feels like forever.
And is that from an acting side of things? Is that from stage management side? Or? Mostly
stage management. I was assistant to the director for 5 shows, I believe. But I've also worked, when you volunteer at theatre, you get dragged into everything. So I have been an assistant stage manager. I've worked backstage. I've done props. I've done dressing, which is hilarious. I've done front of house. So I serve tea and coffee and get people their wine and champagne, which is lovely. I've also... Definitely
too important there to be letting go. It sounds like you do everything.
I feel like it sometimes. But certainly I've done one stint on stage. Probably not my proudest moment.
Really?
I am an awful actor. I will admit to that. But it was fun and it was an experience and I learned so much. And that's probably why I find a lot of stage direction and dialogue appears in my books, because if you're saying something, you quite possibly are moving while you're saying, at least I do. I'm a very animated talker.
I just shifted my legs just to a laugh then. So yes, I know what you mean by animated.
Yes, absolutely. So, I talk with my eyebrows. That's, I have many problems.
I wouldn't call that a problem. Not in the slightest.
It's really useful when you're mask wearing during COVID times.
At least people will know when you're angry or
right.
either angry or curious, but that's up to them to work out. Yeah,
well, that's right. Exactly. There's all sorts of there's lots of eyebrow acting you can do, but
yes, the one eyebrow lifter, you don't get in trouble.
I do like that one. I possibly use that too often, but I do like a very snarky one eyebrow raise.
It's a good, powerful but simple tool.
Yes, absolutely. So yes, direction does creep in and I do have to pull that out and create the scene, so to speak, rather than she said this, walked over here, opened door, which is very stage direction-y.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's interesting. And I'm just curious, it sounds like you've crossed a lot of different genres and styles of writing: flash fiction, fan fiction, short stories, anthologies, obviously full-length features and novels. Working for stage or theatre for that long, were you ever involved in any like stage plays or writing? So
it's amazing. It's always been on the sort of the back of my brain. I was asked several times by various theatre friends. I don't, it's not something that I've looked at yet, but I will say yet.
Yes.
Who knows? It could happen in the future. I'm certainly very dialogue heavy, so it fits. It's because I write fantasy and sci-fi. I guess Harry Potter, the stage play, which is playing at the moment in Melbourne. Shout out. That one probably gives the best hint with fantasy and stage work, and I think because I write science fiction and fantasy, that I don't think I could write a show without it. So knowing that there's more capabilities for it now possibly means that in the future, maybe yes.
What about, because you mentioned that the Butterfly Stone you're anticipating to be, in your original thought was possibly five books. That's quite a big series. Have you ever thought of dabbling in crossing over to, say, for example, script writing, screenplays for either series or
I would love that so much. I would love that so much. Back when I was 17, I got up to a lot when I was 17. I wrote a script. The sky's the limit
back then.
I know.
It should be today too.
Yeah. I wrote a script for Buffy
Oh, there we go.
And in my youthful enthusiasm, sent it off thinking, of course, they would look at it. Of course, no, they didn't. It's ridiculous. It's, but
For a moment, there was hope.
Oh, for a moment, there was hope. And yes, so it is something that I do. And I used to do a lot of radio plays. And I do narration now where I narrate short stories, which is a lot of fun. I love doing it. But I think that I wrote radio plays when I was 10 and 11 and dragged my sister in and forced her to do it as well with me and try to find my brother who would be off playing and drag. I don't think I ever managed to drag him in, actually. It was more my poor sister that had to put up with.
Okay, so in effect, he became an unwilling prop every now and then.
Oh, absolutely. Always.
But radio plays, I never would have guessed.
Yeah, radio plays, a lot of radio plays. I had a lot of fun with those, coming up with different skits and intros and all sorts of things. So I suppose I should get into podcasting.
Wow. Anything by the sounds of it, anything that involves writing, acting or voicing, you're crazy. There.
Yeah, I like to throw my hand in.
Yeah, why not?
Give it a go is what I always say. Give it a go. If you don't think you can do something, try.
Yeah, have a shot.
You never know what you can do.
Yeah, and if you can't do it, then at least you know.
Yeah, well, that's right.
Don't keep yourself in suspense.
And you see what you like as well. I think if you're not enjoying it, it's a slog. It's tough work. You've got to find something to enjoy about whatever it is, whether it's singing, writing, performing, acting. If you're not getting some joy out of it, I don't know why you're doing it.
Exactly. But I think we're very similar in the sense of, I mean, I've dabbled with lots of different things over the years, but the one common element probably from the age of 9, I would say, would be when I wrote my first stories and stuff, is writing. And it hasn't always been there as a constant. You know, there's been years where other things have taken priority or whatnot. But then, you know, either reading or writing, that is just the number one. And I think that's something that will carry me through. And you know, as writers and book lovers, I think we are potentially the luckiest, and maybe and musicians, because, you know, fingers crossed, depending on how much the universe wants to offer her grace. But even if I live to 100, I can still, in theory, write, and I can still read. As a former heavy metal guitarist, I don't think I can play heavy metal at the age of 80. Although Black Sabbath and Iron Maiden are proving that wrong.
I want to see 80-year-old you playing Black Sabbath. That would be brilliant.
I'm not sure about that.
Well, it's funny. My grandfather, who sadly passed away last year, he got me into reading when I was 4, and he scared the living daylights out of me because he wanted to read to me, and I found him very scary because he was a big, you know, grumpy old man, and I'm like, oh no. And then he read me fantasy. He read me short stories in fantasy with dragons and witches and also, which obviously this is where everything comes from. And I would demand to climb onto his knee and have him read to me the stories, and then he would change the ending and I would be horrified.
Oh.
And, you know, right up until the very end, he was still reading.
Oh, that's so good.
Oh,
so nice.
Him and my nana, the two of them together, 94 and 95, and they would still be reading. And I even adore the fact that at 94, when my papa had some heart problems and he couldn't read action and war books anymore, so he took to reading romances because it didn't stress his heart.
Oh,
how gorgeous is
that? Yeah, that's amazing. Although I would have thought the opposite. Sometimes romance can be heartbreatking. That's
obviously not to my papa, but he got joy out of that. So,
I was going to say, it sounds like his romance was successful for a very long time.
Yes.
That's beautiful. So the power of stories. It took that scary Popper and turned him into, you know,
and took him into
treasure.
a lovely teddy bear who I demanded to have read to me every time I saw him.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Probably why I love books so much now.
And do you spend a lot of time reading fiction at the moment, or do you prefer to do research, or just too busy writing?
I'm the worst. I have the biggest to read pile currently. I have a Kindle and a library of 7 bookshelves that are stacked to the brim, double shelved.
Read or unread?
Majority read.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, otherwise that's a long
majority read. I have been
session
collecting.
ahead.
collecting since I was about 12. But yeah, and Nana and Papa took me to the library every weekend, and I would walk out with books taller than my head, pile of books, and so did they. I'll be honest, they were carrying 6 or 7 books. I had 6 or 7 in my hands as well, and I am a big reader. I am all for reading. The more you read, the more ideas can be sparked by who knows what.
Yeah, 100% agree. And I mean, I love movies as well. And you're probably similar to me. We grew up with video stores, and there's a lot of reminiscing and memories at the moment of people talking about videos. I can't believe the price of some movie titles on VHS, which I collect at the moment. So that's probably not a good thing. But but that joy of going into a video store, that's still here today, and they're called libraries or a bookstore.
Absolutely. Star Trek DVDs, and finding the VHS of episodes 3 and 4, which was a nightmare. You could never find 3 and 4. You could always find 1 and 2 of any series. It didn't matter what series, Doctor Who even. You'd get the first episode and the last episode, but that middle episode,
the little middle
never
one.
Find.
Actually, speaking of Star Trek, I managed to get my hands on a 8mm reel, 600 foot of the original Star Trek, which is pretty cool if you're a Star Trek fan, because obviously you got to put it in the 8mm projector and feed it through. And
yep, that is brilliant.
Yeah, very cool. And Mr. Comma himself is on there.
Love it.
But just that feeling of going into a library with all those books there, and just, you know, anything's possible. And it's just, it's probably one of the last bastions to have that feeling. I mean, I love the way things have gone digital. I've got a Kindle as well. I love that you can travel and carry, you know, as many books in your pocket as you want, so to speak.
Exactly. I have over 50 on my Kindle that I could get to, because I have not yet read. And that's fantastic if you get stuck on the train, or if you're having a bad day and you just want to escape. There is always something. There's something there.
Absolutely. And the cool thing about the Kindle, I know some people are diehard paperbacks, which is fine as well. I love good paperback. But I think the cool thing with Kindle is if you've got a couple of titles in there, you can cater for different moods. And then, so, you know, if I've had a grumpy day, I'll go back to this title. And then, it was a good day, I'm in a positive mood, I'll continue reading this title. So you kind of like your remote control flicking through the channels and going back to the show that you're enjoying.
Yep. If you're feeling like a classic, out comes Jekyll and Hyde, or Jane Austen or something, or you could jump to your fan fiction, which I love, and I'm always going to sell that because it's brilliant. But I have so many of the Star Trek series and Star Wars and Buffy, and I have an insane collection. I've even got my old Nancy Drews and my Hardy Boys here as well. So
Famous Five?
Yes, I love the Famous Five and the Secret Seven and Trixie Belden. So I'm not surprised I wrote a detective story.
Well, what about when it comes to Star Wars fan fiction? Is that something you've ever toyed with? Or
Oh, yes.
Yes, I thought the answer might be it.
Oh, yes. Well, I have to admit, Tony in Whitefire is my female Han Solo.
Aha.
It was
hence the name of your website?
Absolutely.
I was going to ask that, yes.
Yep, I'm old enough to be one of the very early adopters of the internet and blogging and all sorts of things. So my original username way back when was Solo.
Yes.
When I went to create my blog, however, of course, all the awesome names had been taken. So I decided I was going to be arrogant enough to call myself Solo the First.
Oh, why not?
Why not?
That's
because
epic.
I was there. I was there in the early days. So yes, hence my blog, Solo the First at .wordpress.com.
Well, that's fantastic. So for anyone out there, if they go to obviously the link that we'll put there, now when you go there, everyone knows now where that name comes from.
Why? Exactly. Where the name comes from and why.
And so we got a lot in common. Han Solo is definitely the coolest and only real character.
And I was so cranky that Princess Leia wasn't allowed to be exactly how I knew she would be. Which she ended up being with becoming a general, but I was wanting her out there kicking ass, and it was Solo, it was the smuggler, it was the rascal, and I'm like, no, I want to see her take control.
Well, as you said, she does towards the end there, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. So Tony was very much I'm going to write a female solo in space.
Well, I think solo is a fantastic form of. It's always been a motivating character for me, and obviously, I guess George Lucas penned most of the lines. But when we were talking before, and you mentioned when it comes to trying something, just try it, and you've got nothing to lose. I like the old Han Solo, and that is never tell me the odds. Just go in and assume you're a winner.
Perfect. I love it. Absolutely, because I hear from children. I've done a few readings with schools and chatted to kids, and the biggest thing that I hear, and it drives me crazy, and I hear it from my niece, and it does make me cranky, and she knows it, is when she says I can't do something. And that infuriates me, because you just haven't tried. And it doesn't matter what it is. If you can't do it after you've tried it, fine. Yep. If you don't like something after you tried it, great. Don't do it anymore. Stuff that. I don't want to learn piano. Oh, it's too hard. Which I did, and I hated it, and I gave it away. So give it a go. But you never know. If you don't try something, you just don't know.
No, that's right. And if you try and you hate it, as you said, well, at least you know now. But you might try it, and it may be super hard. It may be super difficult. It may seem impossible. But something about it you might like, and therefore suddenly you'll take on that impossible challenge. You'll take on the difficult things because you're enjoying it. And
yes, exactly. I mean, I've acted on stage. Terrified me. It was awful, and I won't do it again. But I learned so much from it, and it taught me so much about me as a person, but also I gave it a go.
Absolutely. Yeah. No one can take that away from you.
That's right. Exactly.
So speaking of giving it a go and trying something new, moving ahead for the rest of 2021, we've still got a big solid year ahead.
Yeah.
What are a couple of the big plans or big challenges that you'd like to take on, or something? What's going to make it a special year this year for Laurie Bell?
I would like to, it may not happen this year, but I certainly want to give narration a go at a book level. I'd love to be able to do an audible Whitefire.
That would be spectacular.
I think that would be absolutely amazing. So that's on my radar. I certainly would like to do that at some stage. Even The Good, the Bad and the Undecided with the short pieces, I think would be so much fun to just listen to on the train. And I know I love a podcast, and I love a good story on tape and radio plays. So yeah, that sort of thing I definitely love. Certainly seeing Neil Gaiman's recent audible of Sandman. I don't know if you've had a chance to listen to that, or if
not yet.
Oh my gosh, that I think that is the dream. That would be absolutely amazing to have almost a radio show of your own book, in his case graphic novels, but they are incredible. You've got to listen to this. Absolutely wonderful.
Did they do something similar? I think someone sent me a file for like an Alien book that had actual actors and sound effects.
And,
it was a full like you said, radio production.
Absolutely. Big Finish. Talking of Doctor Who, Big Finish, they do Doctor Who stories that are an hour, and it's read by the actual actors many times, but sometimes the narration team, but they get the actors in, and Tom Baker does the Fourth Doctor on. Oh my God, it's amazing. It's like brand new material. It's so good. Yeah, David Tennant and Matt Smith, and they all are doing radio. The audibles that they tell a story, and it's wonderful. It's a brand new story, and it's all done in narration, so they have different actors and new stories. Love new material.
2021, and although technology has gone through a whole heap of changes, and we can call it audible, we can call it narration podcast. But essentially it's radio play, isn't it? So it all things circular comes back to ultimately a good story is so popular. Because I mean, look at something like Audible books or Audible. Yeah, Audible.
Exactly. And something like COVID, which isolated us all and trapped us all inside, and we couldn't share and we couldn't see each other. But there were books, and there's narrations, and there's stories, and there's shows. The arts are just amazing, and it frustrates me so much that they don't get the funding that they
No,
deserve.
I agree wholeheartedly.
Oh, because everyone, or at least certainly myself and a lot of people that I know, that's where they found their joy in
Exactly.
lockdown.
Absolutely. Couldn't have said truer words.
Yeah.
Either you've been inspired by music or discovered a new band that's
Yep.
captured an emotional state and given
Or
you
podcasts, got into podcasts or
got in
YouTube or
podcasts,
who knows.
or even a show on Netflix if it's something that moved you. And although I'd hope the actors and the directors are getting paid, that they're probably not in the category.
Yeah.
There's so many Australian artists, musicians,
Yes.
all sorts are struggling. But
Absolutely, and it certainly kept me going, and I certainly would hope that it kept a lot of other people going too. So, and digital downloads, narrations, audible, any kind of just material, it keeps you going.
Absolutely. And look, with Australian book lovers, hopefully it's an opportunity for all those hungry imaginations out there, and all those book lovers that are looking to gobble up Australian books. Hopefully this is at least one tool in the tool belt for authors and writers.
It has been
to
marvelous.
be able to get generate some sales that weren't there before, and really I want to turn our authors into superstars here.
Yes. And Darren, you and Victoria have done amazing work with the website and with the podcast and the interview. It's such a wonderful site. If you haven't gone to see the website, go and visit and have a look at all the Australian authors and give us all your support. And there's some great books on there.
Oh, the list is amazing, and it's just, and I mean, another 10 or 12 popped on today. Amazing titles. It's been quite busy just getting everything up and running, but things are starting to find their rhythm now, which means there's going to be a lot more interaction through our Facebook and Instagram pages. And at the moment, Veronica's doing fantastic with the Twitter pages, but we're going to be starting to flood Facebook with all the titles and all the new additions. So, fingers crossed in the next 6 months or so, we all will be rock star writers, because that's what I think Australian authors deserve, because there's so much great work on there. For example, The Butterfly Stone, The Tiger's Eye, White Fire, The Good, Bad and the Undecided. And you've been such an amazing guest and full of energy. So you've been part of a podcast.
See, give everything a go.
Give everything a go. So who knows, maybe, as far as moving forward, for 2021, we want to expand the website slowly but surely with all sorts of tools. We're going to obviously have publishing packages for first-time authors, artists, local artists in Australia for all different book designs, which to give people a real option to get hands-on when designing the cover and stuff. But fingers crossed we can actually find some way of maybe reaching out for those people around Australia that would be willing to have a shot at recording audiobooks. And
wonderful. I'm in, hands up.
It's such a fantastic opportunity, and it would be great if we can incorporate some sort of central
having a central source of just information would have been invaluable to me as a 17-year-old when I was starting out, and certainly 10, 15 years ago. That's where you want it. You had to go to so many different places to find stuff.
Fingers crossed we can make this one work. But with the internet, it's a double-edged sword, because you can find so much information, but then you can find so much conflicting information.
Yes,
so that's
rubbish. I'll be honest.
Yes,
plenty of rubbish.
Yes, and scams, which is surely going to be a subject of one of the podcasts coming up, because that's something
hope so.
You really need to. I've been stung. I think most writers have at least come in contact with one
once.
Whether they've been stung or not, but
or you hear stories and you think, oof.
And that's why it's so important, and so inspiring to talk to someone like yourself who can give frontline tips about the journey you've taken, the literary journey you've taken, the journey you're still taking. And it's not just some random blog on some weird website. It's Laurie Bell. We listen to you talk right now. Listeners can go straight and have a look at your books and visit your website. And then, that's only going to give more gravity and more importance to some of the wonderful advice you've given.
Oh, thank you.
And I hope readers will definitely jump on and have a look at all those tales. I, for one, am definitely putting that one on my list when I sit down to have a read, because An Agent with a Robot Dog, you've got me,
and I didn't even tell you about the snarky AI on her spaceship.
No, don't tell me. I'm going to get that surprise.
Well, as I've heard many times, a lot of people say your mileage may vary, which I think is a great saying. So what I've gone through, others may not, or they may listen to and find helpful hints, and that's all you can do. Listen, listen and ask, and don't ever feel bad about asking a question.
No, and keep momentum moving forward,
Yes.
because look at all this beautiful work we've got from you, Laurie Bell, at the moment. And
Thank you.
something definitely tells me it is far from the last.
Yes,
work
hopefully
we've
more
seen
to
from you.
come.
And I really hope we have the opportunity to chat again on the podcast,
That would
and
be great.
and even have you involved with the website somehow moving forward when it comes to audio productions and possible audio books. It
That
sounds
would
like
be wonderful.
sounds like someone who's worked in radio plays and stage. Oh, this is the beauty of having the website, because prior to the website, I was just a tapping writer, pretty much keeping to myself. Obviously, I worked with Veronica on one of the books, and which was a fantastic
Yes.
friendship I made
Oh
over
my
Twitter.
gosh.
But otherwise, primarily, I was on my own. So here I am now with the opportunity to talk to people like yourself and hear from authors. So
Brings all us Aussies together. I love it.
yes, let's make it magic. 2021 is going to be magic. It's going to be powerful.
Love it.
And thank you so much for being part of the ride.
Thank you so much, Darren. Thanks for having me, and keep up the great work.
And likewise yourself, Laurie, and we will no doubt talk again soon. So
Great.
thank you so much for joining me, and all listeners out there, we'll have all the links for Laurie's website and all the books, obviously, you can find on australianbooklovers.com, as well as the links from other locations where the book is available. This has been an Australian Book Lovers podcast, and I look forward to visiting you all again through those ears, and hopefully bringing better entertainment every time. Take care, everybody.
Well, what a brilliant chat you had with Laurie. And the fact that she wrote Whitefire at 17 is amazing.
Yes, it was a really cool experience. And as I promised, her energy just jumps out of the speakers, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. And look, I'm going to admit to the fact that I have a Tom Baker scarf in my wardrobe, and even though we're not going out all that much, when I was ever going on the train to Melbourne, I had a big coat and I had Tom's scarf around me, and I'd often get smirks from people who were obviously closet Doctor Who fans who would go, yeah, we know what you're doing.
Oh, hang on, now I'm jealous, and it's coming into winter. I might now I want one. I might look up a Tom Baker scarf, because
there
it's
you
always
go.
my favourite.
There you go. But I've read 2 of Laurie's books. I've read Whitefire and also The Good, the Bad and the Underside. It was a really clever way to put things together. And it just gives you such insight into all of the world building, as you and Laurie discussed, that comes into, creating a fantastic story, and the stuff that never gets on the page, but brings that depth to your entertaining read. Yeah, it's really good. She's got an amazing creative process. Really good. And I love the Shatner comma. How good is that?
You gotta love anything Shatner.
Oh, yeah, all right. Okay, I'll admit that. Yep.
Anything Shatner, and Christopher Lee's biography that includes a heavy metal Christmas album, I think it is. So,
Very good.
Two profound moments.
So one thing I do hear that feels like it's important for authors in particular, because, we talk about writing can be such a solitary process. And while we're trying to expose a little bit more about people's individual processes, and also we're getting now into who else is in the process of bringing a book to life, and we're talking to Tas writers in our number 10 episode next week, and we're talking to other organizations about their support for writers. But I think it's interesting that people will often find a group, so they'll find their own tribe that is people that do the same kind of things. They'll go into writing groups, or there'll be a particular group of friends who may not be writers, but who'll read, do some beta reading for them. And, Laurie talked a little bit about some of the groups that she's been with over the year, and maybe has grown through and that kind of thing. So, yeah, it's just writing community is out there. So don't sit at home on your own. At least get yourself on Zoom or on to one of the groups somewhere, or go down to your local library or look in your local paper and find another person who is in that same kind of creative process as yourself, and unload. Because I know that, my husband will chat to me, how'd you go? And I'll talk to him about the work and that kind of thing. And he, bless his heart, he listens, and he's always so interested. But I can't tell him the process necessarily, or the fact that this particular sentence, that I battled with over and over and cut it out and put it in and cut it out and then came back. But somebody who's writing will go, oh yeah, and they'll get it. So get connected to writing communities.
Yeah, I think what we need to do, actually, this will be really, really good inspiration for our listeners out there, because I think what's needed is a new word for the English dictionary, because as a muso, obviously, when you're learning an instrument, and in my case that was guitar, acoustic electric, you spend so much time alone, you sit there, you play, you emulate other people's songs, you write your own songs, you're learning techniques, it's just nonstop. But sooner or later, you might want to play in a band, or usually you start, find someone else that plays, and you might want to sit down of similar style, and at first you're just swapping techniques, or show us what you can do, and eventually you have a jam, and and fun, and as absolutely amazing it is, to explore an instrument on your own. But then when you sit down with somebody else and then start talking ideas, and how about if I do this and do that, you do that, and it becomes, it's a whole new magical realm. And I think the same thing for writing too, and obviously it's a little bit different when it comes to writing. It's not like so much of a jam where I'll write this sentence, you write that sentence, which you can, of course. But like,
which
as
we
you
have
mentioned,
done, actually.
Yeah, which we have done. I'll write this chapter, you do chapter.
That's right.
Excuse me, definitely something you can do. But as far as just getting together with another writer or writers, and as you mentioned, Veronica, just chatting about technique, chatting about, when I edit, I do this. Have you found this, or what do you do? So musicians jam. What do writers do when they get together? We need a cool word.
We need a cool word. Well, perhaps there does need to be a word. It just made me think of like the making up of new words, or neologisms as they are. Fantasy writers are very good at those kind of things because we make stuff up all the time, languages included. There is a really lovely work called The Dictionary of Obscure Sorrows, and maybe we'll talk about that a little bit more on another day. It's one of my favourite places to just browse, because it's a website. It's also a YouTube channel. A guy called John Koenig, and what he does is he coins words for emotions that don't have a descriptive term. So it is just brilliant. So there was I did a blog on one called Sonder, which is the emotion of watching people go past you and wondering what their lives are like.
And that's cool.
Yeah, it's just amazing. So, if I just, click on there, what have they got? Ring lawn, which is the wish that the modern world felt as epic as the one depicted in old stories and folk tales, a place of tragedy and transcendence, of oaths and omens and fates, where everyday life felt like a quest for glory, a mythic bond with an ancient past, or a battle for survival against a clear enemy, rather than an open-ended parlour game where all the rules are made up and the points don't matter. And so that's a word, and you can use the word ring lawn now in something, and people go, oh, what is that? You can look it up on John's dictionary, and there it is. So no, he's got some great words.
Well, I might definitely have to look into that. But yeah, look,
yes.
I
you need to think of the word then.
Well, but I apologise in advance if there is a word, but I've never come across it. Like say, for example, as musos are just riffing together, just riffing out, just jamming. So what do writers do when they get together? Oh, we're just X, Y, Z. So I think maybe if you've educate me if I've missed out on the term, because I've never come across it. But if it's not really one cemented yet, well then let's come up with one. And definitely send in an email, or jump on Facebook, or jump on Twitter, and bombard Veronica with the whole suggestions. And because I think if we can make a general consensus with yourself, myself, and our awesome listeners, then maybe I think we've got to do a coffee cup. Australian Book Lovers, just litten. I was thinking lit, but no, lit means a little bit different nowadays. Yeah, I was just lit. No, but you know what I mean.
What do you call it? Yeah, what's the equivalent of jamming for writers?
Yeah, jamming / riffing. Yeah.
All right.
So anyway,
I'll put it on Twitter and see what we get.
Yeah.
Okay.
Old champagne cork out of nowhere. Yeah. Oops, that one bounced off the wall, and it's out now. So we'll see what happens. But
there you go. A quote. We have one more quote each to share. What have you got? You go first this time.
I'll go first? Okay. Well, sticking with for me, the science fiction theme and the pop culture and whatnot. But I like this because it's, I don't know, it reminds me that sometimes you just got to have an opinion. So this is by Ian Banks, and the quote is as follows. My point has always been that ever since the Industrial Revolution, science fiction has been the most important genre there is. I thought,
Yeah.
well, you go, boy. I'm sure some people are going to argue, but having passion and an opinion can be is always a worthwhile cloak to wear.
Fair enough. That's it. All right. Well, so my second quote is, "It is never too late to be what you might have been." And this is by George Eliot, who many of our listeners will know was actually Mary Ann Evans, and her pen name was George Eliot. She was an English novelist, poet, journalist, and translator in the Victorian era. Yeah, she was born in the early 1800s. And it was prompted by Laurie talking about if she doesn't know something or she thinks she might like to do something, she just gets out there and does it. And she was encouraging people to do that as well. And yeah, it's kind of perfect. It's never too late to be what you might have been. So don't leave that book mouldering in your brain. Start typing, start writing, as Laurie does on the train. 10 minutes here and there, and before you know it, you're going to have a short story or a novel or something else.
Yeah, I really like that quote. And like I said, don't wake up and feel like the train has left the platform because there's another one coming. Well, no, you just build your own and ride your own train.
That's it.
There's never not a train to catch as far
Doctor
as
Who scarf notwithstanding.
Yeah, grab it on, whack it around, ignore those looks, stand proud, and then as you walk to make your exit from the train, casually drop a jelly bean on the floor, and then when you hear someone go, turn around and wink, because then you know they're a Doctor Who fan. Now that was a beautiful quote, and definitely, that's a nice one to sort of wake up and almost use as your mantra while you're making coffee.
Yeah, that's it. The sun's going to come up every day, at least for the next few generations, before science fiction decides to drop an asteroid on it or something like that. But anyway, let's not get too much further.
Probably time for our... Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Yes, I was just going to say, looking forward to the next episode where we've got CJ and Ariane from Tas Riders. And if you want to find us on the website or online, we are at www.australianbooklovers.com. We're on social media, Twitter at Australian Books, and we are on Instagram and Facebook at Australian Book Lovers. Now, if you would love to leave us a rating on your favourite podcasting store, I've just joined us up now that we've got a few episodes. We're eligible to join a few more kind of podcasting apps, so please leave us some stars or a couple of words and you'll absolutely make our day. Or send us an email. We're happy to read emails as well. So that's it for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely please send an email. We'd love to hear from you, whether it's show suggestions, an idea for a new word to what happens when writers get together and start riffing their ideas. Anything at all. We'd love to hear from you. Even what you've been reading, a good Aussie book you've read, doesn't even have to be on the Australian Book Lovers website. It's all about Australian literature, and we'd just love to hear what you readers are enjoying out there when it comes to our fantastic homegrown talent. But I think, and before we go to our tagline, I promised Laurie I would make a public apology, because during the interview I did call her Laurie, and I was corrected, and her name is Laurie. So, and if I have said Laurie during this podcast, I apologise again. Sorry, Laurie. That's how I remember it. Sorry, Laurie.
Sorry, Laurie.
I'll never forget now. But tagline time.
All right. So I'm going to count us in, and we're going to say, remember, read more Aussie books. No, that was terrible. Let's do it one more time.
All right.
Okay.
I thought it was going to be to read. I was thinking that, and I was like, oh no, the train is left without me.
No, it's left without you. Never mind. But it's never too late. So let's start it again. Everybody, I'd like you to remember, read more Aussie books.
Fantastic. And stay tuned, because we've still got a couple of great features and entertainment for you before the end of the podcast. To everybody for tuning in, downloading, listening, thank you so much. And we really hope to see you at our next episode, to be able to be a part, have you listen to. Yeah, we won't see you.
We have talked about streaming, but as you say, I wouldn't be able to sit here in my slippers. I'd have to do my hair and all sorts of things.
There will be some special streaming episodes coming, but we'd love for you to join us. Thank you for joining us for this one, and we'd love for you to join us for what will be episode 10 with Tassie Writers. But otherwise, take care, keep writing, keep reading, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Bye for now.
Hello, my name is B.G. Hilton. I live in Sydney and I write speculative fiction. Mostly, but not always, of a light-hearted nature. You can find my debut steampunk novel, Champagne Charlie and the Amazing Gladys, in the ABL Sci-Fi section. You can find my other caffeine-fueled writings at my website, bghilton.com.
Stealing Time by Rebecca Bowyer. Another brilliant story from the writer who gave us Maternal Instinct. In Stealing Time, Bowyer presents us with a dystopian tale of generational love and angst. The familial woes are woven into a world that chooses to ignore the contribution of its older people and mandates their involuntary death at 65. Chilling and challenging, especially to this reader who is 60. The author shades our familiar world with subtle snippets of speculative fiction, beautifully complete in their execution. But, and this is what reads so well for me, the story is all about mother love. Varia's love for her son Kerr, and Eleanor's love for Varia. Even in the secondary characters there are hints of Marissa and Zoe's love for their children. Time and time thieves are no barrier to what these women will do for their children. The exploration of these flawed and flawless characters is fabulous, and though I held my breath towards the end, Bowyer didn't disappoint. It was a fitting and hopeful finish. A great read.
Let's meet again. Where magic happens.
Australian Book Lovers acknowledges First Nations peoples and recognises their continuous connection to country, community and to culture. We pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, and honour the sharing of traditional stories passed down through generations. We're committed to a safe and inclusive welcome for authors and readers of all cultures and backgrounds, including people of LGBTQIA+ communities and their families.